The wind blew tumbleweeds across the sun-baked prairie. Dust, the smell of leather holsters, the heavy breathing of cattle, and the rumble of wagons all blended into the endless noise of the Wild West. In this land, turn your back for a second, and you're dead. There were no rules here except one: armed means alive. But in the first half of the 19th century, the weapons used by cowboys, hunters, and travelers had a major drawback. They were slow. The musket required a long reload. Flintlock pistols could only fire once, then became useless pieces of wood and metal. Any raid, any clash, any argument that escalated into a gunfight devolved into a chaotic race to reload first or fire the first and only shot. And it seemed that this was the way the world would always be: slow, cruel, limited by the technology of its time. But history is always changed by individuals, those who see things differently. And one such person was a young Yankee named Samuel Colt. He was only 16 when he first set sail on a merchant ship. He wasn't expecting heroic deeds or discoveries. It was a simple desire to see the world. But it was on that ship, in the roar of the deck, the cracking of ropes, the rhythmic turning of the wheel, that he conceived an idea that would revolutionize the world of firearms. Watching the rotating steering wheel, Sam wondered, what if we created a pistol with a rotating cylinder? A weapon that could fire not just once, but several times, without requiring reloading between each shot. It wasn't a flash of inspiration worthy of legend. It was an almost childish admiration for the mechanism. But this admiration became a spark that gave birth to a weapon that changed American history forever. The road to its creation was long and arduous. When Colt began to put the idea into metal, he was ridiculed. He was told that a gun with a rotating cylinder was a dangerous toy, that it was unfeasible, that no one would trust their life to the design of a young upstart. He was called a dreamer, even a con man. He suffered failures, bankruptcies, and betrayals from business partners. His factories closed and his debts mounted. But Colt didn't give up. He continued to insist rapid fire was the future. And only years later, when America was on the brink of war with Mexico, when armies desperately needed an advantage, did fate give his invention a chance. It was then, in the desert sands, where death lurked behind every stone, that American soldiers first got their hands on his revolver, a weapon capable of firing 6 shots in a row. There, under the scorching sun and the bullets of Mexican dragoons, the Colt revolver proved itself to be a lifesaver, a game-changer in gunfights, and a weapon that allowed one man to stand up to 3 or 5. Rumors grew like the myth of a new wonder weapon. Soldiers told each other about the magic 6-shooter. Cowboys began looking for an opportunity to obtain such a pistol at any cost, and Native Americans perceived it as iron thunder, capable of stopping a rider from a distance no one had ever dreamed of shooting. By the time the war ended, America already knew the name of its new gun king, and that name was Colt. But the story of the revolver is more than just a tale of technological breakthrough. It's a story about the formation of the American character. In the Wild West, the Colt became a symbol of power. It became an instrument of equality, something later encapsulated in the words, "God made men different, Colonel Colt made them equal." In saloons, at frontier outposts, on the endless prairies, the revolver became an extension of the arm. It protected prospectors, leveling the playing field between rich and poor, old and young, experienced marksmen, and those holding a gun for the first time. It became part of mythology, part of the American dream, part of the history of the exploration of lands where only those who knew how to defend themselves survived. And today, nearly 2 centuries later, Colt's name resonates just as loudly. The revolver, born of a young dreamer on the deck of a ship, became the weapon that defined an entire era. And to understand the scale of its influence, one must delve into the history of the creation of every component, every mechanism, every victory and every defeat. Because the birth of Colt isn't just the story of a gun. It's the story of how one idea changed the face of a nation. The weapons of the first third of the 19th century appeared primitive: flintlock pistols, smoothbore barrels, and manual reloading of each shot. The mechanisms were simple, often crudely forged parts adjusted by hand. But the Colt revolver was something entirely different. A mechanical system that employed ratchet wheels, cocking pins, cams, and serrated locks. At the center of the design was a 6-chamber cylinder, machined from a single piece of gunmetal. But the key was not the cylinder itself, but the rotating mechanism. When the shooter cocked the hammer, a complex sequence was triggered within the frame. The ratchet slid along the teeth of the drum, moving it forward one sector. The locking pin at the bottom of the frame fit into a slot in the drum, locking it perfectly against the barrel. The trigger occupied the combat platoon, compressing the mainspring. The synchronization of these actions was so precise that experienced mechanics of the time considered such a design almost impossible. The angle at which the locking pin entered the cylinder groove was particularly challenging. If it entered too early, the lock would disrupt rotation. If it entered too late, firing would become dangerous due to misalignment of the barrel bore and chamber. Colt solved the problem with elegant engineering. He introduced oblique guide planes on the lower grooves of the cylinder, which gently pushed the pin at the right moment. This allowed the mechanism to operate reliably even with partially worn parts, which was revolutionary. Conventional gunsmiths of the time worked by hand. Every barrel, every trigger, every pin was adjusted with a file. But Colt did something different. He built a factory using precision machining machines capable of producing parts with minimal tolerances. For Colt 1851, Navy, and later Colt revolvers Army 1860, used reversible lathes, profile planing machines, vertical milling machines, and even machines similar to prototypes of future drilling machines. Every part was standardized, which was unthinkable at the time. Historians claim that Colt's factory became one of the first examples of mass-produced machinery, later used by automobile and aircraft manufacturers. The steel for the cylinders was additionally heat-treated to withstand propellant pressures of up to 1,400 bar, an enormous figure for a mid-19th century weapon. The frame surfaces were case-hardened, increasing the hardness of the layer to a level comparable to modern low-grade alloy steels. One of the main dangers of early revolvers was the chain, fire, a chain explosion. If the fire spread to an adjacent chamber, several charges would detonate simultaneously. The consequences were catastrophic. The drum would explode, and the shooter would lose fingers or a hand. Colt developed several engineering solutions. Deep chamfers under the capsules prevent them from falling out. A tight fit of a spherical bullet, which is compressed against the edge of the chamber and seals the charge. Reliable tapered barrel with precise fit, reducing gas leakage. Using grease on top of the bullet to block possible flame breakthrough. These measures made Colt revolvers some of the safest in the world. Colt's greatest achievement was transforming a technically complex mechanism into a reliable field weapon. U.S. Army tests showed average service life is more than 3,000 shots, minimum failures in dusty conditions, the highest resistance of the drum to overheating and wear, the ability to shoot with one hand without reducing reload speed compared to flintlock weapons. For growing America, such figures were a technological marvel. The Civil War was the moment when the Colt revolver proved its effectiveness not on paper, but in combat. The Union Army purchased thousands of Colt revolvers, Army 1860 monthly. The revolver became the standard weapon for cavalry, officers, scouts, and artillery crews. A new tactic emerged. Cavalrymen used 2 or 4 revolvers instead of sabers, providing a barrage of fire at short range. Colt's factory grew economically, from a small workshop to an industrial giant. Between 1855 and 1865, the company's turnover increased nearly 20-fold. The Hartford factory became one of the first enterprises to implement a bonus system, standardized work processes, and clearly defined process charts. The technical design of Colt's revolvers was so sophisticated that many of their features are still used today. The stepping mechanism of the drum rotation is the basis of all modern revolvers. The frame-barrel interface is a direct ancestor of the Smith & Wesson design. The concept of weapons with interchangeable parts is the basis for all modern firearm systems, and these are not poetic words. These are recognized engineering facts. American historians call the Colt Company a private analog of what Henry Ford would later achieve: mass production with high precision, reduced costs, and consistent quality. As a result, Samuel Colt effectively created modern weapons industry, concept of serial production, unified standards, and the idea that weapons can be mass-produced and affordable. His revolver became not a tool, but a symbol of U.S. technological power. Samuel Colt died in 1862, never having seen the full impact of his weapons, but his designs survived eras, wars, and revolutions. Some Colt models remained virtually unchanged for over 100 years, a testament to their engineering excellence. And today, when historians examine 19th-century Colt revolvers, they say the same thing. It's not just a gun, it's a machine. It was mechanics, precision, engineering, and industrial audacity that made the Colt revolver the weapon that changed America forever. The story of Samuel Colt is more than just the biography of an inventor. It's the story of a man who saw the future where others saw only the familiar. His journey from a young sailor watching the wheel turn to the head of one of the most technologically advanced factories of the 19th century reflected America's desire for progress, speed, efficiency, and independence. The world around Colt was changing, and he became one of those who shaped it. Looking back, it's easy to forget how radical his invention was. Today, the revolver is a familiar object, a classic weapon. But in the mid-19th century, the very idea of repeatedly firing a shot without reloading seemed almost a challenge to the laws of mechanics. Small arms were slow, unpredictable, and required careful preparation before each shot. Colt didn't offer an improvement. He proposed a redesign of the entire concept of firearms. And he did so at a time when many engineers couldn't even imagine such a system was possible. But Colt's contribution was not merely technical. He created a new industrial approach, a new business model, a new view of standardization. The Hartford factory became a symbol of America's ability to produce not only raw power, but also precision, reliability, and repeatability. His methods were later adopted by automotive engineers, machine builders, aircraft manufacturers, and toolmakers. In essence, Colt became one of the first American industrialists to believe that the future lay in machines, not artisans. The future lay in standards, not chaos. He understood the importance of image, marketing, and reputation long before these words became part of the business lexicon. His guns were mentioned in newspapers, displayed at exhibitions, and demonstrated to politicians, military personnel, and entrepreneurs. Colt created more than just a product. He created a brand, a legend, a symbol, and this legend stuck. Colt revolvers have become an integral part of American history. They accompanied cattle drovers and gold miners, Army Scouts and Texas Rangers. They carried them to war, on expeditions, and protected homes and caravans. These weapons played a role in the Civil War, the exploration of the West, and the development of law enforcement. They have become so deeply ingrained in culture that separating myth from reality is now almost impossible, but this is precisely what makes Colt's legacy so powerful. He didn't just give America a gun, he gave it a tool that shaped the nation's character. Confidence, independence, self-confidence. All of this became part of the image of the Western man armed with a revolver. And while reality was far more complex and harsh than the movies portray, Colt's revolver truly became a symbol of an era, and the era shaped its image. From a technical standpoint, Colt revolvers still command respect. Their mechanics, despite being nearly 2 centuries old, remain a model of engineering purity. Modern gunsmiths still study Colt's designs, and collectors hunt for early models, seeing in them not only historical value, but also technological beauty. Every click of the cylinder, every geometrically precise detail, conveys a solution born in an era when engineering was just learning to transform ideas into mass-produced products. Yet Colt's influence extends far beyond the firearms industry. His approach to manufacturing became part of the American model of industrial development. He didn't just create a factory, he created a principle: precision, repeatability, standardization, mechanization. These are the principles that later gave rise to Ford, Winchester, Remington, and General Motors, Electric, and dozens of other companies that shaped the 20th century. Colt's contribution, then, is a contribution to America's industrialization, its technological leadership, and its ability to look forward. Today, his name is known not only to historians, collectors, or gunsmiths. It's familiar to anyone interested in American history. It's featured in films, books, and computer games. But beneath all this cultural layer, the fact remains: Samuel Colt was an engineer, an entrepreneur, an innovator who created what no one before him had dared to create. He transformed a rotating drum into a symbol, a mechanism into a legend, an idea into an empire. And though times have changed and firearms have advanced, Colt's legacy lives on. It resonates in the click of the cocked hammer, the gentle rotation of the cylinder, and the simple yet incredibly powerful principle: fire turn ready. This rhythm became the rhythm of an era that forever changed America. Like any great inventor, Samuel Colt couldn't foresee all the consequences of his work. But he knew one thing: the future belongs to those who dare to combine idea with steel, thought with mechanism. He did it, and in doing so, he changed history.